Welcome back, everybody. We're doing roots and factors of a quadratic. This is a very different looking piece of paper than we have been doing lately. If you're doing things in the same order we're doing things here at Oscar Smith, we've been doing algebra, factoring, distributing, foiling, and now all of a sudden we just got a graph, right? It just seems kind of random. This is going to be a day where it's a very different day than usual. Instead of algebra, add this, multiply this, add this, multiply that, it's going to be like 99% vocab today. It's just vocab. You want to try to learn these vocab words, and if you don't learn them, then you didn't learn anything. Okay, it's all vocab today. We're going to learn quite a few words. We're going to start talking about this word up top. All right, so the first word I want to look at is quadratic. Have you ever heard the word quadratic before? That's a very mathy word. We've kind of heard of quad before, like maybe you've heard of like a quad bike is like a, four-wheeler. Okay, and so quad makes us think of four, but ironically it doesn't really have anything to do with four. Okay, your quadratic is your x squared things. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If I go to Desmos and I make a normal x, that's just a line, that's not a quadratic. But when I make it x squared, now it's a quadratic. Okay, and we can also see that the quadratic, which come from x squareds, have U shapes. Okay, so look at this picture. We got a U shape and a U shape, and on the bottom another U, and down here another U. So today we're talking about quadratics, which are just x squareds, which are just U shapes. And I'll give you one more vocab word that has to do with quadratics, the word parabola. Have we ever heard of a parabola before? Right? Oh my gosh, what kind of math word? We're learning vocab words all of a sudden. A parabola is just a U shape. Okay? Obviously, Albert Einstein is not saying U-shaped graph. He's got a fancy word for it, and the fancy word is parabola. Now, we'll get a little bit of like a glossary at the end. These two aren't that important, to be honest. It's very good that you start to learn it, but we're going to hit you with the parabolas in like a week. For now, the four words that we really want to learn go on these four blanks here. Okay? Now, the thing about these four blanks is that they are all the same. Okay, and this is another kind of weird thing. You're going to learn four words that are all the same thing, which is kind of strange. It says connection to part A, so this is a review. What is the point where a graph crosses the x-axis? Anybody know? It starts with an X for the x-axis, and then it is an I word. Nice job. The x-intercept, which I spelled wrong earlier today, so I've just, locked it in this time. So our x-intercept is the point where it crosses the x-axis, and here are three more words which all mean the same thing. Roots, like the roots of a tree. Zeros, obviously like the number 0. Or solutions. So in a weird way, these four words all mean exactly the same thing. So sometimes a question might use one of them, like A, which says find the roots of each graph. And you might think, we've never learned what a root is. but a root is exactly the same thing as an x-intercept. So here's my x-axis. Here's my quadratic, which is an x squared U-shaped parabola. We're going vocab crazy today. And where do I have x-intercepts? I heard both of those and they're correct. -1 and +2. Now when it says roots, it's the same exact thing as x-intercept. So the roots are going to be x equals -1 and x equals 2. So far, we've talked about 6 vocab words, quadratics and parabolas, which just mean curvy graphs. And we've talked about 4 vocab words that all mean the same thing. But when we actually do a question, it's look at where they touch, write it down. You don't have to add numbers, you don't have to multiply numbers, you don't have to subtract, you don't have to divide, you don't have to FOIL, you don't have to distribute. Literally just look on the paper right here, say x-intercept, x-intercept. This one is 0, this one is 4. So write x equals 0, x equals 4. So even though we're learning new words, when it comes to the math, this is very simple. This is literally just write down the numbers that you see. We're going to add the last 10% of the notes, and pretty much when I'm done explaining this to you, when I get done with this gap right here, then that's pretty much you've learned everything for the whole day, is the word factors. Okay? And how do factors relate to x-intercepts, aka roots, aka zeros, aka solutions? We've done the warm-up. Here's the warm-up. And on the warm-up, it was factor. And what I want to point out is that every single question for factoring is parentheses. Every single one, parentheses. When you factor, you break it up with parentheses. So guess what it's going to look like when it says factor? Good catch. It's going to be okay, Brandon. You're going to be all right. Our factors is going to be parentheses. But here's the main thing. This is what we're trying to learn today. I'm going to put it in green. We can find the factors by changing sign. And this is where today goes from extremely easy to still very easy, but maybe not extremely easy. Because factors are not the same. Factors are not in this list. Okay? In fact, if you want to even write not factors, right? Factors are not the same. In fact, factors are kind of opposites. Now, I'll prove it to you if I go to Desmos and I come up with something like x, and let's just pick easy numbers, -1, parentheses, x minus 2, parentheses. Now, here's my graph. Do they cross at -1? No, it crosses at +1. Does it cross at -2? No, it crosses at +2. So they're just opposites. Factors and intercepts, they're just opposites. So I'm sure you're already ahead of me, right? X minus 1 is the root. What's the factor? X plus 1. X equals 2. What's the opposite? X minus 2. Because this one's positive, so this one's negative. Now, roots have equal signs and no parentheses. Factors have parentheses and no equal sign. So make sure, sometimes students kind of copy me and they follow along, and all of a sudden I look at their paper and they've got something written like this, where it's like x equals positive 2. Right? This is obviously wrong. No equal signs allowed. No equal signs. Okay, make sure that you're not writing an equal sign inside your parentheses. At this point, that's everything except for this one little, like, look at this 0 here. What are we going to do with this 0? Now, obviously it crosses at 0, so 0 is correct. And when it comes to the factors, this 4 is going to be very easy. It's a positive 4, opposites, I'm going to put minus 4. But what do we do with the 0? Am I supposed to put x plus 0? Am I supposed to put x minus 0? Do you ever write plus 0? Like, are you ever going to say I'm 16 plus 0 years old? Or I got 200 plus $0 in my wallet? Like, no, right? So we're not going to write plus 0. And here's the real secret to, like, big time math here. If we're not going to write plus 0, because why would we write plus 0? Do we need the parentheses? Because what parentheses do is group things together, but if the x is all alone, we don't need the parentheses. And so our factors, the best way to write it is just a plain old x with no parentheses. Because all that parentheses do is group stuff together, and we just don't have anything to group together. You will have a question on the classwork today, and it will say x equals 0, what's the factor? And I'll probably have 3 people who raise their hand and say, I don't know what's going on here. Okay? If your root is 0, your factor is just an x. All right, at this point, these questions take about 15 seconds. You look for your intercepts. There it is. You write them down as roots. X equals -3. X equals positive 2. And then you write them down as factors, which is kind of opposites. Parentheses instead of equal signs, and a -3 changes to a +3, and a positive 2 changes to a -2. And that whole question literally takes 10 seconds, no adding, no subtracting, no multiplying, no dividing, no foiling, no distributing. It's quick, it's easy, roots, factors, that fast. So I've done a lot. What do you think the answers are for number 2? Roots would be x equals -2 and x equals positive 2, and the factors would be exactly. Put them in parentheses, x plus 2, x minus 2. I mean, literally 10 seconds, and we're moving on. Let's look to the back. I think we pretty much got this. Let's just do one of these. Let's get rid of number 4. I'm going to give you guys 40 seconds to do number 3. All right? Try to do number 3. If you are stuck, you got to ask a question, because this is something that I hope we're really confident on. Try to do number 3 for me. Hopefully you've got the roots by now. All right, so let's see it. Did you find -5, x equals -5, +1, x equals 1, and then factors being opposites, x plus 5, x minus 1. Everybody good on that? Promise? All right. Now number 5 is definitely something a little extra. If you have at this point tuned me out because you're thinking, okay, this is so easy, I can get this right every time, you know, blah, 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 blah. Number 5 is definitely worth your time to pay attention here. We've got our x-intercept. We've got our U-shaped curve, which we call a parabola. And we look for our x-intercepts. And I've only got one. I only see this one right here. It looks like it's at -3. X equals -3. But the thing about this is that a parabola, a U shape, guarantee has 2 factors. Okay? A parabola guaranteed has 2. Okay? Because if you only have one, x plus 4, it's not a U. If you only have one, x minus 12, it's not a U. If you only have one, x plus 6 is not a U. Once you have 2, now it's a U. So you are guaranteed to have 2 factors. But when I look at this, I see one of them. I don't see the other one. So what are we going to do? What are we going to put in this factor spot? We have to have something, but we have to be careful. You know, if I put x minus 2, that means it has to cross at +2, which it doesn't. If I put a plain x here, that means it has to cross at 0, which it doesn't. So what am I going to put in this factor spot? What did you say? Another 3. The exact same thing again. So this is when we start getting into kind of like not just freshman math. So it's going to be a +3 because we kind of skipped number 4. Because factors are opposite of roots. So since the root was a -3, the factor is a +3. And since there's only one, we actually have a double root, or sometimes it's called a repeated root. And I'll prove it to you, right? If we have x plus 6, if I make it 2 6s, now it has that bounce right on the 6. Well, I should say -6 because it's opposites. And so if you only have the one x-intercept, but you're a U shape, you're guaranteed to have 2 factors. It's actually just the same one twice, which is kind of weird, but that's how it works. All right, last question here. We'll finish it up. If the roots are 7 and -6, what are the factors?
X plus 7 plus -3.
Roots and factors are opposites. So if this one is a +7, our factor has to be opposite, minus. It has to be opposite, +6. Now, to finish up this question, let's do some vocab really quick. All right? We've got quadratic. And what is a quadratic? It's just an x squared, okay? We've got parabola. And oh my God, that word seems like Italian or something. But what does it mean? It just means U-shaped, right? Remember, Einstein's not saying he's got a U-shaped graph. He's calling it a parabola. Then we've got 4 words that all mean the same thing. What are the 4 words that all mean the same thing? We've been talking a lot about x-intercepts and roots. What are the other two?
Zeros and solutions.
Zeros and solutions. All four of these things are the exact same thing. And then we're going to finish with factors. And factors are the opposite of those four. So whatever these four are, if your x-intercept is 12, your factor is the opposite. It's a minus 12. Okay? Factors use parentheses, and these ones use equal signs, right? So they're kind of like opposites. Okay? I think that was really good notes. I think we got through it in a pretty good amount of time. Remember, you're not having to add or subtract any numbers. You literally just look at them, write them down, and then the factors are the opposites. Okay?